You are tuned to the Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio, broadcasting from Southern California. This is Sharon with my co-host Gabriel for another episode about orgone energy. We have seen some great changes here. There's been a lot of news lately about the drought actually lifting and drought restrictions being eased in California. And this is a long time coming because we've had drought engineered for years here. A lot of people know about this.
Yeah. While they are at the same time continuing to promote the drought and saying things like, it's not over yet, it's getting worse, we will be in the drought forever. Just the usual rhetoric from the mainstream media, not with any truth behind it whatsoever, of course. But no, the drought is over, and now it's just we're at a point where we have to continue to get the reservoirs and lakes back to their levels. And some of the reservoirs are already there. That's what we're finding out when we dig a little deeper. But the drought is over. It was engineered in the first place. That's something that a lot of people are still having trouble coming to grips with. But orgone energy and orgone energy devices have done a fantastic job in this region in particular, which is a very hard-hit region, by the way, of undoing the death energy and the effects of the cell phone towers and the positive ions and all of that.
Well, there's a recent article in the LA Times that said that now a lot of the state, or part of the state at least, is out of the drought, and that drought restrictions are being eased up on now. We were having water restrictions, and of course, water companies are raising rates. That's happened in our community.
Yep.
And now finally, the mainstream is acknowledging it, because for such a long time they would say, oh, we just had a great big rain and there's rains all over California and big snows and snowpack's increasing, but it won't make a dent in the drought. What they like to say about this is that El Nino is the reason. And for years and years, they've also said El Nino is coming. And then right when the rainy season was about to start, then they would say, oh, for some reason, El Nino didn't happen and we didn't get rain. So apparently a warm spot of water out in the Pacific Ocean is responsible for everything here in California. But we know that's not true because we've distributed thousands of organites around California, and so have many others. And since this distribution began in earnest 2 years ago, we've seen great changes in the weather. In addition, this is not a cover-up. This is what I'm trying to say, is this is not a cover-up of geoengineering. There's a cover-up of orgone energy going on here. The media is not going to acknowledge it. They're not going to acknowledge why the rain started again. And in Los Angeles County, they recently did cloud seeding, where they were spewing silver iodide off of the hillsides of the San Gabriel Mountains. There's no way this stuff was getting in the atmosphere. This stuff was just falling onto the earth. It was not at a high altitude. And in addition, silver iodide does not effectively bring rain. It can only increase rainfall that's already coming by 15% at most, and that's on a good day. So we know that the orgone energy is increasing the rainfall, and that the media will do anything they can to say there's another reason for it.
Including whatever hoax they can dream
It's
up.
El Nino, it's the cloud seeding. Well, then another issue we've seen lately is controlled opposition, where there are many people who talk about chemtrails and geoengineering, yet they don't talk about orgone energy at all. If you bring it up, then they're not going to talk to you anymore. Some of them, like Dane Wigington, got very angry with me about orgone energy. He didn't want that being brought anywhere near his organization.
Threatened to call the police on you
for showing up. Yeah, with information on it. So there is a controlled opposition that wants to hide orgone energy. And so I think that the chemtrail spraying, that's pretty clear that that's going on. People know that now. That's been outed on television. It's been outed on Twitter. Stephen Colbert, a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago now, had something about chemtrails on his show, and he had a geoengineer on his show to talk about it. Yeah. And very recently, actually maybe about a year ago, somewhere in the last year, Kylie Jenner tweeted about chemtrails. This is something that's
on TV, it's on social media. Right. It's out for all intents and purposes.
So now the new cover-up's orgone energy.
That's right. The next layer of the deception is upon us, and we have to get past that.
So we know that orgone energy can remove chemtrails. We know it can neutralize EMF and bring back rainfall. And that brings us to our special guest today, Georg Ritschl. Georg Ritschl is perhaps the world's most prolific orgonite gifter. His organization, Organize Africa, has turned around deadly energy used in engineered drought throughout Africa. He's been gifting orgonite with his organization since 2002. They have distributed widely around. They've increased rainfalls and crop yields, cleaned up the energy. And George has a great presentation that you might enjoy. I love this presentation on the global BEM, the Breakthrough Energy Movement conference. I have it posted up on my site. You can watch it and see the remarkable work that George and Organize Africa has done to improve the lives of people in Africa and their communities, restore the climate, and so much more. Georg Ritschl, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on the Human Frequency today.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me here. And yeah, I feel quite flattered by what you said. I mean, we are not really an organization. We are actually two and a family and a few people that work with us, and sort of a loose alliance of people who sometimes help us. So an organization sounds like the United Nations or something,
Well, Sharon and I, it's only two of us, so small groups
right.
are usually the most effective.
Right.
Yeah, you see, that's actually the great thing about Orgonite, is that it doesn't take an organization to turn a subcontinent around.
Isn't that amazing? That's what we explain to people. I get a lot of emails. Gabe and I took on Southern California, just the two of us, and we have another friend that works with us too. But sometimes, not all the time. It literally the two of us took care of Southern California, and we started to expand from there. And other people take on other areas. And what you've done, it's literally, I know it's really just a small group of people. You guys have turned around, half of Africa, if not more.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
The southern part. I mean, it's what is normally referred to as Southern Africa. So that goes up to the Congo, but not into the Congo, right? So, which is a big challenge, the Congo as such, because it has been destabilized and in all kinds of ways messed up in a big way forever. So, but it's very dangerous to go there.
I would imagine so. We have so many questions for you. We are followers of your work. We're very, very interested in what you do, and you've been doing it for such a long time. How did you get started, and how did you first hear about orgone energy and learn about it?
Well, funny enough, I read most of Wilhelm Reich's books when I was about 14 years old, and so in the middle of puberty, basically, and by odd chance, my mother had the discovery of the orgone, the function of the orgasm, in her bookshelf. And I read that, and wow, I thought, wow, that's interesting. I was very much into psychology, probably being an awkward, oppressed teenager. I was extremely interested in psychoanalysis and all these things. So my access to Wilhelm Reich was actually more via Wilhelm Reich, the psychologist. And then I got really excited about his writings and got all the other books that were available then. And the orgone stuff, which I also read at that time in the early 1970s, appeared quite weird to me. Okay, I have to be honest. And I sort of, I read it, and then I thought, no, that's weird. That's, and a lot of people said, no, Wilhelm Reich was a talented, gifted psychoanalyst, but in his late years he lost it kind of, and then he started getting a bit kooky, and so that, then I became an architect and did all kinds of reasonable things, and at some point it came back. I started getting interested in all the, let's call it, alternative history topics, and realized that the world isn't exactly the way we have been told. And among these topics, free energy showed up. And I was actually more like researching into free energy when I stumbled upon Don Croft's Orgonite Cloudbuster, which was published on a website by Stephanie Rell. I'm not sure, I think she's still around. And that sort of made a sudden connection, because I was aware of the stuff that Wilhelm Reich had been doing in the 1940s and 50s. And they seemed very far off in a way, because I couldn't verify that any of his claims were right. And he was also using a language which he had created himself that was completely different from the language normal scientists are using. So it was kind of cumbersome to read in a way. It's a bit like Mehran Kesh, who's also invented his own language that nobody understands. And here was suddenly a project that seemed so doable, and that was actually fascinating, because an orgonite cloudbuster is fairly easy to build. And so I had started a bit of an email conversation with Don Croft, and then pretty soon I built my first cloudbuster, because it sort of connected back to my earlier reading, and that was quite amazing, because I made the base, and then when I stuck the pipes in, essentially a blue hole was forming. Or no, the sky was blue, but there was like a ring of cumulus cloud was forming around a blue center. And after a few hours, that was, I can only describe it as imploding. So the ring was basically falling into its center, and it was coming down as a strong rain. And I
It's
thought,
amazing.
wow, that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
that was before anybody was even gifting towers and stuff like that. There were no tower busters. So
What year
Don
was this?
basically, it must have been early 2002,
Okay.
or maybe end of 2001.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were
And
seeing those negatively ionizing effects of this machine. It does amazing things to
well,
the
I have to
sky.
be honest. I mean, I know that people say it's negatively ionizing, but I've never measured that, so
Right. Okay.
I
It's
don't
just
really
about
know.
observation, right? It's just about observation of cloud formation.
Yes,
But
yes, for
yes.
us, it's very much that. And this vortex, because it was a vortex, remained visible from very far. I was driving around Johannesburg up to 30, 40 kilometers away. I could still see where that blue hole was for months. And
It's wonderful.
so, yeah, and then I was participating in a forum. I don't actually remember what it was called. It was on Yahoo Groups, I think, where kind of the earliest orgone pioneers were talking, and that was very creative, because a lot of the subsequent developments were sort of hatched out on that forum. So I'm not sure if from the beginning there was this thing called the holy hand grenade, the orgonite cone. But I know that in the beginning we actually used HHGs for each and every cell phone tower, until Don basically realized that we had to do something more simple and cheaper, because there are so many thousands of these cell phone towers, and that's
Right.
basically when the tower buster was born, and some people started massively gifting, and
Right.
that was obviously Don Croft himself with Carol, and then there was also a guy in LA.
Don Bradley.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
for quite a while, he was keeping his name secret. So it was kind of, I don't even know if I should mention his name, if he likes
Oh,
that or
it's
not.
out now. It's in
It's
you
out.
know, it's in the
Yeah,
book. It's in the
yeah,
book by Don Croft. So I
yeah,
think it's
right,
out
right.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and he took care of a lot of the first wave of cell towers that appeared in Los Angeles in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And of course, they've added so many
Right.
since then that it's required going back more and more
No, you
times
Yeah.
to
always
take
have,
care of the new
there
ones.
is what I call maintenance gifting. There's one thing is to sort of spread out, and cover ground, which I see it very much in these kind of almost strategic terms. Um, and then you see 5 years later, maybe if some of your orgonites have been fallen prey to overeager gardeners or, I don't know what.
Oh, yes. That's a problem in Los Angeles. The gardeners are extremely overeager to destroy every plant in sight there. So, but
I
we
see.
carefully hide them. Our organites are
Yeah,
kind of a lot of them are kind
yeah,
of concrete
yeah.
colored, so they hide well in the city.
Okay, yeah, camouflage is. I make mine NATO green, eh? So
Yes,
because
we have one.
so
We have one
ours
of your
are kind
green
of
ones.
okay. Mine are olive green mostly.
Yes.
So because we have some green vegetation, and very often we throw them out of driving cars in the kind of outlying areas. In cities, it's different. You have to carefully hide them, obviously, because every square centimeter is much more, looked after and used, obviously.
Yeah.
So at some point, I was actually making them with magnets, so I could kind of click them onto lampposts and stuff like that.
Oh, that's clever.
And then I
Yes.
made them without color, just the gray of the aluminium, and I put magnets in. And but I mean, Johannesburg is probably a bit like LA. It's largely suburban, so it's not, the center, the high-rise built-up center is not very big and not very important either.
Hmm.
It's kind
Yeah,
of
we that's
yeah.
like in
Sorry.
LA too. Yeah, it's very much like LA.
It's
We
LA,
actually
city
went
like
on yeah. We went on bikes throughout many of the worst parts of LA so we could really be thorough. And
yeah.
there are just, I think there are thousands of towers in LA. I mean, maybe in LA proper, hundreds, but then there are so many suburban areas surrounding. And we've just been going
Yeah.
systematically throughout. Do you
Hmm.
notice a higher concentration of towers in what's considered to be the bad areas? That's what we noticed in Los Angeles,
Um,
like the higher
that's
crime neighborhood.
hard to say. I did find, South Africa has this legacy of um, black townships, and because of the segregation called apartheid that was prevalent in South Africa, and which is still basically there, although people are now able to escape it. Okay,
Hmm.
so there is this thing like homelands where you have large amounts of people living often in high density without any real, opportunities for employment and so on. And often these places have very high tower densities, I found.
Yeah. Right. Like in
And
Los Angeles, we don't have the segregation by law, but it just happens anyways. And
mm,
neighborhoods
mm,
that
mm,
are mostly African American, they will have far more towers than the white neighborhoods. And I've just noticed this in the course of our gifting, and they seem to
mhm,
be target populations. So
mhm,
we actually target the most low income neighborhoods of cities and towns. We've been to places like San Bernardino, is considered one of the worst places in Southern California. And we did a
mhm,
very thorough gifting there. And there are other places like El Centro, which was mentioned by Wilhelm Reich in his book Contact with Space as the most advanced
mhm.
desertification in the
Yeah.
United States. So we tackled that area. So we go for desertified areas and we go for
Mhm.
economically and socially depressed areas as well.
Compton.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
Compton by bike. We both got flat tires
Mhm.
there, in fact. We had to
Well,
take the train
I
back.
cannot judge whether that's courageous or not from afar, because I don't know those places.
I think it's no big deal. I think people overestimate the
Mm,
amount of danger in those areas, but
mm,
I think that there's a lot of stigma, and I think that people are people, and they don't generally want to hurt you. So we go into those
mm.
areas that are very targeted, but I found the people there to be not any different than anywhere else.
That's right.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
we would find the not necessarily cell phone towers, but the panels, just the
Yeah.
single one or two panels, like on top of hospital buildings, and we'd see them by
Hmm.
schools, and yeah, it's very insidious how they place them in those
Do they
areas.
also
And
paint? Do they also paint fake brick patterns on your panels to make them
Yes.
blend in with the wall behind and
yes,
stuff like that?
Yeah, we've seen that
they
too.
they do all kinds of half-hearted
Yeah.
trickery, visual trickery,
Do you
but
guys have
it
Yeah.
doesn't.
fake palm trees down there?
Yes, we
We
do,
have
of
fake.
course.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got
We have those.
2 or 3 models. We've got fake fir trees and fake palm trees and a few others.
Yeah,
We've actually seen a couple of fake eucalyptus trees. That was a real treat.
Wow.
yes. Yes. They really
You
do
can
try
you
to
can always
disguise.
yeah, you can always see that it's steel pipes though, the angles at which
Yes.
they are welded and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would like to ask you about the first time you went gifting with Tower Busters. How was that for you, and when did you do
Well, the
it,
first
and
the
where did you
first
go?
time was actually me taking an HHG that I had made, like a single, I mean, I can't even believe that nowadays because we are making hundreds of them almost every day. And I went to a place near a park where there was one tower on a traffic island, and I remember that I was looking around in every direction whether somebody was watching me. My heart was pounding, and I was like hiding in the bush and trying to, at the same time, while I was doing all these silly things, trying to look inconspicuous. And then I
Right.
dug that thing in, and I thought, now what, So I remember that very clearly. That was, I think, the first tower that I ever gifted.
Where was that?
Uh, well, that was here in Johannesburg, near where,
Okay.
where I lived then.
I see.
Um, yeah, I wouldn't help you if I said it was near Amarantia Botanical Garden.
Well, you know what? We
There it
were very
was.
secretive about where we gifted for a long time, and then we realized we could say we gifted this town and we gifted this tower as long as no one
Yeah.
knows where it is, because now we learned from Don Croft they could be within a quarter mile of the tower and be effective. So it's
Yes.
very easy
Yes.
to
Yes.
hide them. We just we have two of your earth pipes. We used one up at the
Hmm.
top of a mountain near us just last
A very sacred Indian
yeah,
mountain
just
called
recently.
Okay.
yeah, called Mount Pinos,
And
and
Okay.
it
Hmm.
was
we were able to actually publicly say we did it because we realized no one's going to find this earth pipe. It's just they're very hard to
Hmm.
find under the
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think
Yeah.
it's
No, I
very
mean,
interesting. This
we've been apprehended by hostile police forces twice in our gifting career, once in Zimbabwe and once in Mozambique. And both times, these guys had the idea that we would now go and collect all our things with them.
they probably didn't
And
understand what they were, though. I'm sure they did not understand what you guys were doing and how much you were helping.
no, I think in both cases they were instigated
Right.
by the nasty ones. The Mozambicans, for example, are normally quite a mellow people who are more known for their inability to appear at any appointed time on time. Okay, and so they're very laid back. And in our case, they showed quite an abnormal energy,
Right.
and they really pounced upon us with guys in civilian T-shirts with submachine guns, and the whole Kahoot counterintelligence and what have you. And
That must have been terrifying.
it was a bit scary.
Yeah.
I think they were professionals. They wouldn't just shoot randomly, but
Still, it's
yeah.
it's, it's very it's extreme. And you described that they were acting out of the ordinary. We have noticed in the course of working with orgone energy, we've become
Mm,
more aware of mind control in our
yeah.
culture. And these towers, so we're talking about cell towers and the energy that they put out. Just as a little background, we talk about this all the time on the show, but just as a recap,
Hmm.
the cell towers are putting out the deadly energy, and these
Hmm.
towers are both altering the climate, desertifying, stopping rainfall, but they're also affecting the people. And
Yeah.
I think they're creating a psychosis in the culture through the energies that they're
Mm.
emitting. So I wouldn't, doubt that these police officers, these militarized police that came after you, were mind
Mm.
controlled, even for a moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in Mozambique they speak Portuguese and some local African languages, so I didn't really have a chance to talk too much to all of them. It was mostly that somebody would interrogate us. Um, I think it was actually the Americans. to be very honest,
Uh,
who basically told them, listen, these guys are terrorists. And, because the story was that we were trying to blow up the Cahora Bassa Dam where they apprehended us, which is the most important hydroelectric dam in southern Africa, partly owned by South Africa and partly by Mozambique. And they are very sensitive with that. And as you probably know, Mozambique has had a long civil war in which kind of mercenary gangs from South Africa would come in and blow stuff up and so on. So if you say something like that, you're actually reminding them of certain patterns, and then they put it into that bracket. And so only somebody has to bring that up, and then all the guys will act as if that's the case because they haven't seen the evidence. They're just being told that this is what it is. These guys are terrorists.
So they think your holy hand grenade was actually a grenade, not an orgone device, maybe.
Well, that's what they told, and then they came up with a totally concocted nonsense where, because obviously nothing ever blew up, they then said that these orgonites were toxic and that they would corrode the turbine blades or something like that.
Wow.
And
That's a little far-fetched.
and I mean, this is like a gigantic lake. It's about as big as what's that lake? Lake Michigan, something like that. It's really big. It's like 300 kilometers long and 150 kilometers wide, and it's really big. So I mean, this is basically the same resin that all the fishing boats have that are on that lake. It's a variety of that same type of resin. So every fishing boat should then be a health hazard. And what they did was actually
ridiculous.
What they actually did was that they put one of our tower buses, which they had reclaimed, into some very aggressive acid, I think fluoric acid or something like that, which then formed a toxic sludge, and then that was the proof they presented.
It's
they
crazy what
were
they'll
not
do
interested,
too.
They were not interested in anything. At the end, they gave it was an interesting experience because even while we were sitting in prison, we were sometimes able to watch some TV, and there was really a national debate in Mozambique between the president and the what you call it, like prime minister, and various other, and the prime minister, a lady, I forgot her name, was kind of saying, no, I think they're not terrorists, they're like harmless crazies, and
you guys made television. You guys were on TV.
Yeah.
Wow, that's out
several
there.
Several times, yeah.
So but when they caught you, I'm just curious. I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, but it also, strangely enough, it also died down. That was also kind of a headline in a major, like, intellectual magazine where, kind of a leftish intellectual magazine. It was on the front page, and I later tried to contact the guy who had written the article, which was basically saying, what a joke. It was kind of que ridiculo, was what it said. And he was saying, now, what a joke to apprehend these guys and treat them like terrorists. But later, nobody wanted to talk about it anymore. Whoop, it was gone.
I see.
So
I see. So
amnesia.
I'm curious about.
It was there in the headlines and on TV primetime, like talk show, primetime talk show with well-known hosts. And then it disappeared. Then basically at some point they realized that they can't really do much, and that all the stuff doesn't stick. And then we found a corrupt solution whereby we had to pay $20,000 to our lawyer, who was actually part of them rather than us. And
as lawyers are.
And who distributed that among the other people, prosecutor, judge, and so on and so on. And then we were given. I mean, that's Africa now. That probably wouldn't work like that in a G20 country. But then we were just given a kind of pink cardboard release slip called prison release slip. The trial was never in any official way resolved.
Wow.
Very strange. So I'm a bit, it obviously served the purpose of making me more cautious and less enthusiastic to go to some places.
Oh, I
And that was
definitely could
maybe
see that.
that was maybe what it was all meant to do. I'm just saying this a similar experience in Congo would probably have been lethal.
So I'm taking it there's no mention of what you were actually doing in the newspapers and then the press. Am I right?
No, there was to a certain extent. I mean, obviously they had to say, like, I mean, there were headlines like zany cult, so and so, and then I was then the cult leader, and stuff like that. So
Right. How did they actually catch you?
as
Did they
if I
catch
was,
you throwing did they catch you throwing the orgonite out of the car?
no, actually, what happened was that we had a boat with us, and we had a problem with the engines of the boat. And then two of the guys that were with us were taking a public ferry. And I had one young, enthusiastic guy from Portugal living in Amsterdam who sort of thought he must flamboyantly involve the whole community because he was like having the time of his life and drew all the attention to this thing. And what I didn't really know then, but understand now, is that Mozambique is quite a police state with lots of informers everywhere, and stuff. So it's kind of not that mellow, easygoing country that I originally thought it was.
I see. Maybe
So
that would
some people,
change after the gifting. Maybe that the gifting can
I don't know.
change that.
Even when we were in that prison, that was actually fed drinking water out of the reservoir that we had just gifted, and that water really tasted nice.
It has the qualities. Orgone energy has the quality to clean water. We have found that too.
So when you
Honestly,
gift,
I only went back to retrieve my Land Rover, and that was a very quick visit after that, because I had to leave my Land Rover as a token to actually pay those $20,000 because I didn't have all of that money straight away. I even went to kind of a plea for help, and a lot of people from the international orgonite community helped us at that point to get that money together.
very interesting. So when you gift orgonite, how is the
Mhm.
weather and the landscape affected by your gifting?
Um, sure, always a bit different, but it always is. The thing that I mostly see is that a hazy, oppressive-looking sky that appears kind of two-dimensional and not structured, changes into cumulus clouds in front of a clear blue background. That's the most typical thing that we see. But there's it really depends on what we gift and how bad it was before. But I find that with gifting there is when you take one single tower buster and put it next to the tower next to your house, you may not have a revelatory experience. But if you are persistent and if you put out at least 50 or 100 and you cover a larger area, you will get a visible result, definitely.
We concur. We've seen the same type of clouds. I've seen them in your videos. They totally match what we've had here. And I also
Mm.
agree with you about how you want to do as many as you can. You want to tackle that grid. They're putting the cell
Yeah,
towers out in a grid fashion, and likewise we grid with the
yeah,
cleaning energy.
yeah. No, you have to cover ground. It's
Yes.
and the problem that I have is that a lot of people are very self-centered and they just think about protecting themselves. It's understandable and it's illegitimate, but we need to have a bit more people who actually feel responsible and also capable of turning things around on a larger scale. I mean, selling orgonite as we do on our website, our customers are 99% on the cocooning side, where they just want to basically keep themselves free of harm.
Right.
But in order to keep ourselves free of harm, we must actually take responsibility for the greater whole. And we can do that
Yeah.
out of self-interest. We don't have to be self-abnegating altruists. We can actually do that out of informed self-interest. But I find in order to live a decent life, I need to sort out my continent here.
I
Yeah.
agree with you. Totally.
We absolutely do agree. And there's a man on YouTube. His name is Dwayne Gardner, but he calls himself Organite Austin on YouTube. And he says in his book, The Science of Rain, we must all take responsibility for the electrical smog in our area.
Exactly.
And that's we absolutely agree with you. Everyone has to not just focus on improving their own little home or their block, their city block, but also just spread out and take care of the whole area around them.
I personally cannot live knowing that is going on out there. I can't live happily a content life knowing that there's cell towers out there zapping the population for, thousands of miles around. So, I mean, I totally agree with that. I think it's amazing what you've done. I'm actually curious, can you quantify how many Orgonite tower busters you've distributed?
Approximately 25,000 by now.
That is so amazing. I am just so thrilled to hear that. You've literally turned around a continent.
Well, I'm not yet sure. I mean, we've still got corruption and all kinds of nonsense here, and even
It takes
attempted
time.
droughts. But
Yeah.
but
It takes time.
I mean, the planned scenario was obviously already in 2005, 2006 to have 10 million hunger dead in places like Zambia and Zimbabwe. And that hasn't happened. So that's probably something we can silently enjoy as a victory, although nobody will ever acknowledge that, and it will never be possible to prove that.
Of course, and there are many so-called plans that have been undergone for the last 5, 10, 15 years or whatever that haven't come to fruition. And I do believe that the evidence shows that is largely because of large-scale organite giftings, such as the ones that you do.
You're preventing depopulation, which is the plan of the global elite. And I know that you know that because I read your blog and have a full understanding of this.
But we will never be able to prove any of this, and it's also okay. I've totally reconciled myself to the fact that there is no public glory to be had with these things. It's something that maybe some people like you and a few others can grasp, but it's not. It's also not for heroism or anything that we do this. It's just we enjoy this. We tremendously enjoy that, and it's a wonderful pretext to do all these trips and feel some real adventure.
That's true.
So it's actually fun to do.
I love it. There's nothing I love more than tower busting. It's my very favorite thing to do. Everything else pales in comparison. And I just want to ask you, this is something that I grapple with all the time. I have to deal with so many people not understanding, and I've got to the point now where I don't really try to have people understand anymore. And I'll tell my friends, like I have a friend for a lifetime who just thinks I'm completely insane. And I have already said to her, you don't need to. Really? So how do you, so I want to ask you that. I want to ask you about that because I find that it's impossible to get people to understand. And sometimes there's feelings of aloneness. And mostly I'm very, very happy that every once in a while I get a little bummed out because I feel pretty alone doing this. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, of course. That's what it is, and even in my circle of friends where they sort of know what I'm doing and so on, but they don't understand the possible importance of it. and I have to live with that. It's like, I mean, I can't run around and say, listen, man, I'm Jesus, I'm saving the world here. It's kind of, you know what I mean.
Well, you're
And
contributing to saving the world, that's for sure. You are a huge piece of the puzzle.
yeah, possible. I mean, the jury is still out. We'll see.
Oh,
Um, and as to like friends from childhood who are now wondering, I have to say, in the beginning of my waking up process, if I want to call it like that, when I started reading all these conspiracy books and all that, I was bombarding all my old school friends with emails, links here and links there, and I was so excited, and I still recognize that excitement in more recently awakened people.
right. I know
It's
exactly what you're
useless,
talking about.
it's it's useless, you have
Yeah,
to understand, and I've given it up. I have also put it in perspective because people may have human qualities even though they're not on your page in terms of how they see the world. And I'm also respecting that. I'm respecting that they may be on a totally different page, and yet they are reliable, supportive human beings, and in their sphere, like rock solid.
right.
And it's not necessary to convince everybody, but whenever they have a question in that direction, so I don't hide what I'm doing, but I'm not pushing it on people either.
Right.
And I wait for them to ask me questions if they're interested, and maybe they never will, and I have lots of people who I might even have over for dinner and stuff who don't really understand what this all is about, but they think it's, I don't know. They
So are
think
the
I have a crazy business doing colorful little pendants, and but if it serves me, then why not?
Yeah. Yeah, we tend to just tell
And
people that we meet that we have that we make resin crafts, and that's about it. We leave it at that.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
are
So it's
the
it's it's been a learning process to give up this proselytizing attitude, but I think I'm pretty much over it now. And I have a
so
forum through my website and so on, so people who are ready to accept these kind of ideas are coming to us anyways, and obviously more and more of these people become our friends, and other people feel less compelled to visit us. So that always it sort itself out also. No.
so are the cell towers very prevalent in Africa? Like because
Um,
In Los Angeles, it seems like every block and a half there's there's another cell tower. But how is
I
it
I
like
would
over there? Or what's the
I would
spacing
I
between
would
towers like?
it's probably a lot wider than in America, and you know, in some of the less developed countries, it's even less dense. That's why we can have sometimes monumental impact with relatively few gifts. I'm quite sure that a place like generally California is probably 10 times as dense in terms of your radiation
I
sources of all
I think you're
types.
probably right about that. California is unbelievably oppressed energetically. This comes from
Mm,
people who don't even know about orgone. I hear it from other people who are in the healing arts,
mm,
interested
mm.
in energy like Reiki. California is under a severe attack. So we're
Yeah.
particularly interested in your work because I think that Africa and California are undergoing similar weather warfare.
Mm.
I think because of the population density here and people's addiction to cell phones, which is terrible
Mm.
in
Yeah.
Well, it's the
California,
same here.
there's a lot of
It's the same
towers.
here. It's the same here. And the first thing that people, even the poorest, have is a cell phone, and then it has to be a smartphone. And
Right.
Yeah.
it's
Oh, we see
also
that on the
it's also
buses in
it's also
LA.
it's but it's also a liberator. It also enables people to do. I don't only see it negative.
Right.
And obviously, at the moment you put a little orgon chip on it, it becomes a lot more less harmful anyway. So I wouldn't lambast technology as such. I mean, we are sitting
No.
here. talking via the internet, and I'm actually using.
But we're hardwired, mind you. We don't use a wireless internet. We do everything hardwired in our house because we want an electromagnetically healthy
Our
environment.
hardwired ADSL is horrible. That's why I had to opt for a cell phone-based modem, and then I've got a Wi-Fi and a Wi-Fi repeater, so the whole house is full of radio waves.
Yeah. Well, I guess it
But
depends where you live. Yeah.
yeah, we're a bit technologically challenged. You know, the glass fiber revolution is only beginning in certain areas,
Yeah.
and we are not in one of the posh areas where this comes first, because
Right, I can understand that. I mean, here in California, we have a lot of options. So we're able to go hardwired and it's very nice. Although I have to tell you, the town where we moved to only has one cell tower, which has only been here for a couple of years. I wish it wasn't
Mhm,
here at all, but this town is very isolated in the mountains,
mhm,
far, far away from the cities. So we have a lot less electromagnetic pollution. And in fact, we had to get an unusual internet connection here with satellite because we're so
mhm.
removed. So
Oh, wow.
we still do what we can, but yes, I know the waves are just out there in the air because we have satellite internet, but
Yeah.
in the
So
house, we try to keep it
are you
healthy.
guys living on a farm? Are you guys living on a farm or?
I wish. We're not that
Oh,
removed
okay.
yet. We're working towards it. We're in a small community, a town of
Okay.
about 2,000 people.
And that tower
Okay.
has been gifted, of
Yeah, we
course.
busted that tower. And also we went up to the top of the mountain, the tallest peak around here, Mount Pinos, which is considered by the
Mhm.
Chumash Indians to be the most balanced place on Earth and the center
Okay.
of the world. They put a big radio tower up there. I'm not sure what they're transmitting, but it looks like a cell tower. And
One of
Mhm.
your earth pipes
your
one
Earth
is
pipe,
up there.
and then
It was
more
about
than
what
four of
I
our
would
tower
have
busters.
suggested. Yeah, I would have
What?
suggested an earth pipe in such a case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And about 7 tower
Yeah.
busters.
We make them too. We make them similar
So,
to yours.
great, great stuff.
Oh, George, I want to give you a chance to talk about your website. You make wonderful orgone products and you have
Mm,
zappers as well. So I want to give you a chance
yes.
to talk about Organize Africa.
Well, Organized Africa has come almost like organically out of our gifting. Somehow, when we started doing this on a slightly larger scale, and then I'm still talking early beginnings, um, we did have the idea of financing that activity by also selling our orgonite. And that led to a very, very crude little website. I think it was actually still HTML. I don't know. I don't really remember how I did it, but it was very crude. And I think you had to sort of write an email, and then I would send you a PayPal request or something. So, anyways, be that as it may, we started making the standard orgonites, the HHGs and the tower busters and the cloud busters. And then as the whole story developed further, we started including a lot of other healing tools. And the zappers are basically very similar to Don Croft's Terminator 2. Not as a rip-off, but he actually showed us how to make them. So it's with his consent that we are making them. Yeah, what can I say? I think we are probably the most complete, or we offer the most complete array of orgonite tools worldwide. I'm monitoring this obviously because we have to see what the competition is doing. We are not so much specializing in like singular art pieces. You know, there's a whole creative scene, people who make absolutely beautiful orgonite pieces, but they're very often once-offs. You know, we because we also employ people in the workshop, we have to stick to repeatable designs, and we
Right.
make certain models, and we try to make them always in the same way, which is
Right.
not completely possible because obviously it's handmade, and even the crystals are different that you put in, and so on and so on. But we are trying to also cover the whole classical range, because I find that a lot of the newer entrants to this are only catering for the flashy kind of like jewelry orgonite and decorative orgonite. Sometimes they go so far as to completely forget to put metal filings in because they get
I've
so carried
noticed
away by
that.
the,
I've noticed that
they get
at the
so they get
beginners.
so carried away by the beautiful gemstones that they put in, and then they put a few spirals and all that. So we're not really going much into that direction. We are not so interested because we are by heart gifters. So we still consider that basically it's the tower buster in any sort of, whatever admixtures you do to spruce it up, but it's basically the tower buster, the HHG, the earth pipe, and the cloud buster that does the job in terms of your environmental healing. And there's no, as much as from a marketing point of view, you want to invent a new gadget every half a year in order to create new interest, but the thing is, in terms of the environmental healing, there isn't much to be invented. It's
That's
there.
true. The Tower Buster is where it's
So,
at. I mean, what you do at
yeah,
Organize
yeah.
Africa is the. I mean, I've seen many designs that you guys have,
Mm,
and it is primarily the functional, Tower Busters, and really that's the most important tool because
mm,
that's how
mm,
we're
mm.
going to end this tyranny of this frequency war on us and the geoengineering. So I think
Yeah.
your products are brilliant. By the way, I don't consider us competitors. I think we make Orgonite too. I think we're both in the same
No,
field,
there's
and we make very different products. I love what you do, and I recommend people to get your products. You make some stuff we don't make. You make earth pipes
mm,
and the chembusters that we don't make. So I think you have a great resource for people.
And
mm,
I
mm.
need to say, just for people, that's organize with an S, ORGONISE, Africa. It's the British
Organizeafrica.com, but it's also organize. It's
or
not it,
orgone. Yeah.
yeah, we're using orgone energy. So
Yes,
I
yes,
definitely
yes, yes.
recommend your site. I think it's great, and you have a great blog too, very informative.
Yeah, I mean, it's been growing over 14 years now, so it's actually quite sometimes difficult to hold it all together because then we also have it translated into other languages, and it's really growing big, And
Well, that's
but
good
I
news for
think
the whole world.
That's very good
I
news for
think
the
there's
whole world.
quite some interesting reading on the website, and I can only recommend that people get into our info pages and get into some of the background stories.
Well, we're going to go for a break shortly. So I just want to say
Okay.
again, check out organizeafrica.com. That's ORGONISE, Africa.com. And also to let you know that Gabe and I will be at Contact in the Desert in Joshua Tree from June 3rd to June 5th. And we'll have Orgonite there. We'll be selling Orgonite, and there will be some amazing speakers. Jim Mars will be there, Laura Eisenhower. I think Graham Hancock is
That's
there.
right.
This
One of
is
my
going to be a
favorites.
very cool event. I hear it's like a big party in the desert. So that's coming up June 3rd, right? Very,
Oh,
very
I'd love
soon.
to be there.
Oh my gosh, we would love to have you there. Please check out our website, thekembo.com. Check out organizeafrica.com. You're listening to The Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Human Frequency on American Freedom Radio. We are back now with our guest, Georg Ritschl of OrganizeAfrica.com. The man has gifted 25,000 tower busters to Africa. That's quite a lot. And it would be a really, really sad world without orgonite. So, George, I wanted to ask you, what was the climate like in your area before any orgonite was gifted?
Sure, more dry and more violent, disruptive thunderstorms.
Oh, that's interesting. So it
That
was
is
not
that's
just
very
about
typical.
deserts.
Yeah, it's very typical for what we call the high veld, which is a very high-lying area where Johannesburg is about in feet, it's 4,500 feet above sea level. So that's why it's traditionally getting much more violent thunderstorms. But we found with the orgonite, they changed in character and they became more harmonious in a way. These lightning discharges, and not like that they rip the sky apart. You know, I mean, we still get a bit of that, and some of that may be weather warfare. I don't know. And obviously, we had our fair share of chemtrails especially in the early 2000s, and kind of those what I call patterns, which is electronic interference, whatever the source may be. And we see a lot less of that. It's still a little bit here and there, but it's ridiculously little compared to anything I see when I travel in Europe, for example, or in America.
Mm-hmm.
Although I must say, America has also improved. It's quite
Oh,
interesting.
much. It's the orgonite. It's
Last
their
time,
major
yeah,
gifters here.
I'm not a frequent visitor, but the last two times I've been to America was I think in 1998, and that was before I even had any conscious thoughts about energy and stuff like that. And I visited New York and Tennessee and Ohio and places like that. And I remember how oppressive it all seemed to me, especially Tennessee, by the way.
Yes.
And I remember that strongly. And even though at that time I wouldn't have talked about deadly orgone or something, but it was obvious.
Right.
And
Yeah, I noticed that in the 90s too. I didn't mean to cut in, but that was very prevalent through the mid to late 90s. That
yeah,
oppressive energy you're talking about, it was nationwide. I felt it too.
yeah. And then we went in 2009 and saw quite a few. We also went to New York, we went to Chicago, we went to Washington State, to Idaho. We met with Don Croft there. We went to Seattle, and we found there were still chemtrails, but the sky generally looked a lot, let me naively call it, happier. And so there was a big change, actually.
It's difficult sometimes with the people who have just discovered chemtrails yesterday. I noticed that, there's
Yeah.
people who are just figuring it out now. They get so upset when they see one trail in the sky, even if that trail isn't doing well, breaking up and the orgone is completely taking it down.
No,
they'll see it and they'll get upset that it's happening.
If they see anything that isn't a completely blue sky or big puffy cumulus clouds, they'll freak out.
Yeah. These are the people
but
who just discovered.
I mean, you mentioned that in your intro before you introduced me, that the controlled opposition. I think
Yes.
that the present day public debate on chemtrails, which is pretty much like your controlled political opposition, it's kind of very hysteric and like, oh, we must make petitions to the. You have that in Germany as well, petitions to the parliament, as if that could do any good.
Yes. Thank you, George. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying that, because this is a big thing on our show about the controlled opposition. And we actually had an encounter with Dane Wigington of Geoengineering Watch, where he does not want the solution being. But he does not want the solution being presented in any public forum, or
He
else.
literally threatened me and Gabriel with having us removed by the police from his event for showing up with flyers. That's it, just to pass out flyers about orgone energy. So
Mhm.
there is definitely a controlled opposition, and I'm also very glad you said it because this is something that many people don't realize. There was just recently a chemtrails meeting in Canada. It was the first annual Global Chemtrails Conference, and I love how they say the first annual, like they're going to do this every year, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. It's going to
this
become an
conference has all
institution.
the yeah, and all the experts were there, the so-called experts. Conspicuously absent were you and Ken Rolla, who are two
Mm.
of the greatest experts on this earth about orgone energy. Nothing of that sort was presented. So I'm so glad you said it. I'd like to get your take on this anti-chemtrails movement that says, yes, you have to petition the government and sound the alarm and let everyone know. What good does that do?
Mm, mm. Well, I mean, it also brings us back to the discussion about proselytizing. I don't think it makes any real sense to try and force these type of controlled opposition events to recognize you in any way. It's a bit like um, it's unfortunate, but I wouldn't personally go to such an event with a flyer or something. I might, pass by wherever the venue is and put some organites around it before,
We did
without
that too. We
without
distributed
contacting them.
300. We
Yeah,
distributed
yeah,
300 on the way to and from the event. We just went to give
yeah,
out flyers because all these people were given the horrible news that they were going to all die in a few years, and we wanted them to leave at
exactly.
least with a piece
But
of
you
information.
see, I mean, Don Croft is even more outspoken in that sense. He says that chemtrails were a real danger in the late 90s, and that they also look different, that they were kind of sulfuric yellowish, and when you were like flying at altitude and sometimes flying above them, you would actually see that they were really kind of sulfur yellow, whereas the ones that we see now are mostly a psyop operation. They are not even very dangerous, and we don't see people dying like flies, so it's not happening.
Well,
People are
and
probably,
that's
probably, I mean, probably dying because they eat too many hamburgers and uh, uh, corn. What is it called?
oh, genetically modified foods.
Corn,
Well,
cornstarch and all that
oh
stuff.
yes,
And
yes.
obviously in
Well, no
America
argument
it's even
there.
worse.
Yeah, the United States is extremely unhealthy environment. As far as the harm the chemtrails are doing, I think that is. I believe they're still harmful where they're happening. I believe places that have been gifted, they're no longer
No,
harmful. But
I'm not
there's
saying that. I'm
definitely
not saying
different
that.
debate on that.
I'm not saying that they're a good thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't say we need to do something about them. But they are not the imminent danger for the immediate extinction of humankind that some
I agree
people
with you on
want to
that.
make.
Yeah, I agree with you,
And
and that's why we went up there.
they were probably meant to be that in the beginning, but as a movement that has been defeated. And what I am saying to these people whenever they really engage in debate is that one should also acknowledge a victory where a victory has been won. And I think that these extreme NMOD programs have actually been defeated by Orgonite, at least in those countries where it is possible to gift without fearing for your life. And I think the real frontier is to get into places like Libya, Syria, Iraq.
Absolutely. We dream of going
Um,
to Israel. We
but
dream of going to Israel with earth pipes and orgonite, and I feel we could
yeah, you
end
should do
war.
that. You should do that. And
And
I mean, there
Gabriel and
are
I are
some
both
gifts.
Jewish too, and my mother's from Israel. And
Well,
the
then you
trauma that
must go.
she grew up
Yeah,
in a traumatized, war-torn environment. I'd like to go there and help with that damage that's been done there.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I mean, Israel is obviously a hotspot that needs to be gifted. There are some gifters already, as far as I know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, there is one lady that I've been in contact with in the occupied Golan Heights, which I don't consider part of Israel, but Israelis do. Um, and she's done some gifting. I sent her 100 tower busters, and they never reached her, though, interestingly.
Oh, it's terrible
So
when that happens.
they were intercepted on spurious grounds somehow. They never said they confiscated them, but they.
What in the world do you put on the custom slip for something like that, you know? I don't, what do you write
Uh,
down?
Decorative plastic objects or something like that.
Yeah, I like to
There-
write
There's actually,
sculpture.
there's actually, yeah, but then they look at the Dirty Harry Tower Buster and they say, what kind of sculpture is that?
Right, right. Exactly. I know. And it's
These-
tough with the international mailing.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah,
But decorative objects made from plastic is the correct description for orgonite.
I see. That makes sense. And then, what can they say about a decorative object made of plastic? I mean, you could take them on
Mm.
airplanes too. So
It
it
doesn't it
works
doesn't
out.
contain it doesn't contain any forbidden substances. Although in the early days, I have to say, just for anecdotal amusement, that Italian customs drilled holes into some of the first pyramids that we sent to Italy, and I'm sure that they thought there was cocaine in there or something.
If there was, then no one would ever be able to use it again. Well,
because
I wanted to
because yeah,
ask
but
you about, we're talking about changing energy, not just in the atmosphere. And I wanted to ask you to tell the story about the hostile village that you went through, where you were getting these terrible stares from the people, then anger, and then what happened after you gifted this village.
actually I don't really remember that episode.
It was
Damn.
something about a
Yeah.
village where you went in
Yeah.
and that everybody was angry, and then
Yeah, you were hesitant to even get out of the moving car. You
right.
just kept rolling through, and then you went back 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, and everyone was just out in the street and conversing with each other and smiling and
I
stuff like
I
that.
can't remember the name of the village. That's why I asked you
That's
to,
an
but
amazing story, but I don't remember it actually.
you don't. Oh, okay. That's
Well, it, it,
okay.
it appears that we're telling the story in lieu of you.
Yeah. Well, I read it on your site, I think, on your blog,
No,
but
I'm sure
uh
it happened, but it's not present. It's not a picture that is present in my mind at the moment.
well, we know that it has this effect because we made a large pyramid, which we gave to a couple of our friends in LA, and they said they had these neighbors that were always arguing, and they put the pyramid outside,
Yeah,
and the neighbors became friends and stopped arguing.
you see,
So
that is
we
that
know.
is that is now something we need to talk about because that's the let's call it the consciousness effect of orgonite. The changing energy and how it affects the way people interact, and that is something we have seen happening a lot. Um, on different levels. One anecdote I can tell you is orgonite in the workplace. I had a friend who's now in the UK who worked in a major computer company here, kind of internet web hosting and servers and all that. And I visited him there for some reason at his workplace, and it was like a open plan office. Um, the atmosphere was generally depressive. The colors were beige and gray, and everybody was slouching. Everybody had kind of their shoulders hanging, and they were really slouching. Okay. So we waited for the lunch break, and then we lifted some of the panels. They had access flooring for all these massive cables that went through there. We put a lot of orgonite in their access flooring, and we hid a few in the server racks themselves, and didn't think much about it, just like normal routine. And a few weeks later, I come back, and the whole place has completely changed. And it's obviously just a coincidence because for some reason they must have had a color psychologist in there, and now it was like happy colors. It was like Easter egg colors, like turquoise and pink and bright yellow, and everybody was kind of swinging, and there was a completely different atmosphere. Another thing, a friend of ours where we've been going for horse riding for years, he was in a relation with lady, a girlfriend, long-term girlfriend, and they were always quarreling and fighting and what have you, and but they couldn't sort of let loose, and go their way. And we placed a cloudbuster there and some orgonite around it, and they actually told us that they attribute it to the orgonite because that was the only factor that changed, that they were suddenly able to part their ways peacefully and actually let each other go and move into their separate directions.
Oh, wow.
And that's the kind of stuff we see a lot. Or for example, when I mean, obviously, or perhaps that Johannesburg is quite well known to be a city with a lot of crime, and that there's a lot of shootings and murder and all that stuff happening. When we sort of comprehensively gifted the city with about 3,000 tower busters in 2003, the first time in an always upward trajectory of crime statistics, the first time that trend was broken, and there was a 13% decrease in murder and manslaughter, and similar decrease in what is it called, robbery with aggravating circumstances, meaning armed robbery. Okay,
So this was
so
statistical, right? This
that
was
was that
measurable.
was that was that was statistic. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Obviously, we should do some more maintenance busting here, because I've done Joburg at some point, and then I started branching out in other directions, and most likely it should have some. I should actually redo the whole thing because it's now been 12 years since I did it.
Well, maintenance gifting is very important, and we were
No, I mean,
actually
we always
told
carry something, put something here and there, but that's a difference from kind of a conscious effort where you grid the whole city.
well, I remember Don Croft telling Gabe, "Don't bother gifting Los Angeles down. Bradley already did it." But he did it
Mm,
in 2002, and we were having horrible skies. I mean, it was atrocious chemtrails. Just
mm,
that
mm,
flat,
mm,
like you described, the two-dimensional sky. They had put in so many towers since then. With every
mm,
new cell
mm.
phone upgrade come the new towers,
And we
and
were having health issues,
yeah, it
which
was.
was a confirmation that it wasn't
Mm.
completely
So,
inert.
so we went ahead and we
Yeah,
we went ahead and busted all those new towers, and we didn't do the old ones that D. Bradley did because we know they're the red and white ones. We knew what they were, so we said, well, those have been
yeah,
done by him. But there were all these new ones. We took care of all the new towers, and Los Angeles underwent a climate transformation. Literally felt
yeah,
like 20 years ago. It felt like when I was a kid. It felt like when I was in high school. Around when I was in high school, it started becoming very oppressive. But prior to that,
yeah.
it felt like those
Mm,
those nice rainy years when I was a kid. So we did the maintenance busting, and when we go back into LA, which we do all the time, anyways, we continue to
mm.
gift because we always see new places that need it.
Yeah, yeah, sure, 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 sure. I had something in mind actually because you were asking about the changes we observed. One thing I noticed is
Yes.
that for example, this season, this summer, which our summer is obviously your winter, so our peak summer season is December, and we had quite a drought, and it was publicly touted as a super drought, although we felt that it was not really happening the way they hoped it would, because they said in October that it wouldn't rain until March, and that was obviously not what happened. And now we have a very, very wet autumn, which is quite amazing. It's actually not the normal autumn that you have here, because we have normally um, a summer rainfall climate on the so-called high veld, and that means that the winters so it starts in autumn that it gets very dry and rainfall becomes sparse, and then in winter, which is June, July, practically no rain at all, and it gets very dusty and very nasty in a way. Although it doesn't get very cold, but it gets very unpleasant in a way. And we get a lot more moisture in these autumn days now, which is quite amazing. Sometimes it feels more like Europe, or like some places in America, like New York State or some place like that,
Well,
which is
that's
weird because
interesting.
it's uh,
That parallels what happened in Los Angeles. We've got in California, we had summer rains this
Mm-hmm.
last year. That's very, very uncommon. We were having
Mm-hmm.
record rainfalls in May, June, and July. This is unprecedented stuff.
Do you
And
normally
they were
get your rain
actually,
in winter?
well, the newspaper went as far as to call it a reverse meteorological spring. They made up a name for it, which is
Oh, well, then, but
preposterous.
then they can still continue their climate change story because then they're not saying global
Exactly.
warming anymore. Because remember, Saudi Arabia was flooded
Yeah,
like 2 months ago. You see, I think there's almost like a battle going on the whole planet with all the atmospheric heaters on full blast, and then organized areas throwing a spanner into their game.
exactly.
That's what
This is
that's what I think is
warfare.
happening.
It's
Yeah, it
energetic
is.
warfare. And it's subtle. Like
Energetic
Wilhelm
warfare.
Reich said, in
Hmm.
contact with space, he already determined we were under this etheric assault and this weather warfare. And this is a long
Yeah.
time ago. This is back in the 50s. He already noticed that this was happening. And now we've got people actively, like you, actively dismantling this warfare against our planet and us. And Wilhelm Reich said, with interplanetary war, we think it's going to be shoot, shoot, bang, bang, but it's not. This is a
Mm,
subtle, energetic warfare that most people can't even detect. And it's being
mm,
done over
mm,
a
mm,
long period of time.
I've seen a lot on our gifting trips. I've seen a lot of cloud formations that it's very hard not to describe as a battle in the sky.
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of that stuff, and it's actually quite exciting. Although, you can try to photograph it, um, but you can't really convey the emotional content of that kind of battle that you're witnessing.
Absolutely. I photograph it
And
daily for my
it's
blog, but
mm,
you cannot.
mm.
I try every day to explain what I see, but nobody will ever know the feeling unless they're involved.
Yeah, that's the thing with these trips, that a lot of stuff is happening that is very difficult to convey. But I think those who are open to it do get it from our expedition reports,
That's
and
true.
that's probably why we are talking here.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
you're right. And yes, I agree with you as well. The photographs just don't
But
do it
I'm just
they just don't do it justice because when you're
yeah,
gifting
just thinking of,
orgonite
of
and you're
some.
out there in the field, you can you can feel the electrical atmosphere. You can it's electrical. The
Yeah.
sky is electrical. The atmosphere is
Yeah.
electrical. You can just feel the energy.
And that's
And
why there's no greater feeling than organite gifting. It is exhilarating.
Mm, mm, mm. No, definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah, we are going to Russia now, actually. You know that, eh?
Oh,
oh,
that's
I didn't know that.
wonderful. That's
Mm.
a beautiful thing. And they need it too.
Yeah, they need it.
Ev-
Although, I mean, I'm not seeing them as the empire of evil in any way.
Oh, no, that's not
Um,
what I mean,
uh,
but just it needs
uh,
a lift. They need a lift over there in Europe in general.
yeah, yeah, they do. And we've
Yeah.
done last August, we have done a cruise of the Baltic Sea, starting in northern Germany and then touching St. Petersburg and uh, Helsinki, Stockholm, and Tallinn in Lithuania. No, it's sorry, it's Latvia and St. Petersburg. So we've already and the interesting thing was that after that happened, they saw from a Polish observatory, marine biology observatory, they saw bottlenose dolphins in the Baltic the first time since 1886.
wow, that's a long time.
Yo,
And we
yo,
know
yo. And
dolphins
they
love
basically,
organite.
and yes, they do. And they entered through the Skagerrak about a day after we started gifting. And
That's so
basically were
beautiful.
seen. Yeah, it's quite amazing. And now we have a chance to actually connect that energy line because we feel like we're laying out energy lines, especially when we do water gifting.
Mhm.
And now what we are
Yes.
going to do on our trip is that we are landing in Moscow and we have a river cruise to St. Petersburg, which is obviously culturally and architecturally exciting and quite a nice, wonderful trip to do. And we are going to connect Moscow and St. Petersburg to that gifting that we've already done in the Baltic Sea. So I'm always interested in kind of creating like connecting lines.
That's very nice. That's very,
And
very
and
nice.
and
Sharon,
that, that
Sharon and I
and
hope
that's and
to
that's
get out into the Pacific Ocean and gift
yeah,
out there and neutralize some of the weather weaponry that's underwater there. But I wanted to
yeah.
ask you, how do you manage to bring the orgonite over on these long
I
trips
don't
over?
know I don't know who's listening here.
Oh,
Oh,
okay,
okay.
okay, never mind. Can you just tell me later? Tell me psychically.
No, I've actually sent stuff by mail
Okay.
ahead,
That's what I
just to
thought you would have to do. That's what I think
yeah,
we would do
just to
too.
avoid kind of stupid questions like what is this if they choose to
Right.
open the
We've only done
suitcases
it
and
by
so
car. We've only done it by car.
on.
I only took some with me once by plane to Colorado when I was doing a show out there for Gaia TV. And I said, I
Mm,
can't go to Colorado without bringing tower busters and organites.
mm,
So I brought just what I could get in my suitcase and I gifted some in Boulder. They made it fine. They don't mind in the suitcase,
yeah.
I guess. It's not a weapon. I mean, it's a piece of plastic with metal. I
No,
mean,
no.
so,
I mean,
but still, you
we've
wonder about the
carried orgonite.
questions.
We've carried orgonite to many countries, to Egypt and other places by plane also, and it
Yeah,
was actually
yeah.
never a problem. Although people have been stopped when they were carrying some of our power ones because they seem to look like an explosive device to some
Oh,
people.
I see.
And so, it's, I don't know. I mean, we had somebody stopped in Brussels, a German girl that was stopped in Brussels and was interrogated by Secret Service types, with short cropped hair, the typical kind of CIA dudes. And they asked her all the questions. Does she know Don Croft? Does she know George Ritschl? Da 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 da. So
Wow,
they
you're
were
famous,
knew
George.
they actually knew what they were after.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Strangely enough, and they exploded that thing in an explosion chamber. But then they had to refund her. We insisted,
that's
and we
that's funny.
and we sent her a new one, and we sent her a proper invoice, and they did refund her.
Oh, wow, I can't believe they actually took responsibility. That's quite amazing. I wanted to
Uh,
ask you about this. This is an important question, I think. I mean, I kind of know the answer because I've read your work and we've done a lot of our own work. But as far as the manufacture of Orgonite and the proper manufacture, you had an excellent piece on your blog, which I referred many people to about the right materials because many people will say, oh, you could make them out of beeswax or shellac. And I beg to differ. That's not going to
mm,
create those piezoelectric qualities that you need, the squeezing of resin on quartz
mm,
and metal. And you had some
yeah.
Kirlian photography on your site of the different organites with different materials. And the one made with
Hmm.
beeswax had the least effect. So I'd like you to talk about the way that you put together organite. Yours are very, very effective. And I'd like
Yeah.
people to, if they're going to make them, to do it right.
I think there is a big misunderstanding out there, especially in what you call the New Age community, because they look at whether a material on its own has to them and to their perception a positive warm energy. And obviously beeswax has a very positive energy, there's no doubt about that. Um, but with orgonite, it's actually not.
Uh-oh. We just lost George for a moment, and I can tell you why.
Yeah,
Because
I
he's
can tell
about
you
to
why
tell you
too.
how to make the organite.
That's
So,
right. And he's about to dispel a
a myth.
Yeah,
misinformation
This
myth.
happens
orgonite
every
is
time.
not,
Hey,
not,
George, you
not
went away for a second, so let's just start over.
sorry, that's
You're
our, our weak. Must I say everything again now? What I just said?
Yeah, you cut
you
out.
right after you talked about the beeswax having a warm quality. The powers that
Okay.
be decided they don't want you to know anyone to know.
Yeah, see, I mean, there's nothing wrong with beeswax. Beeswax is a wonderful material, and but people now think that because the polyester resin that we are using is a chemical material, that it's somehow negative and that you must avoid it. And there's also a strong propaganda going on against aluminium, although aluminium is actually the most effective metal filing ingredient for normal gifting orgonite. And
Yeah.
that's for two reasons. One reason is that the filings, due to the way it's being machined are thinner and finer. And what you really want is as many as possible border layers between the aluminum and the resin, because basically the conversion of energy or the acceleration of the stagnant energy is happening in the border between the metal and the resin. And
Yes.
and also aluminium, when it's shaved off in this machining process where the shavings are produced, it forms microcrystals on the shorn surfaces, which apparently also helps. So um, the aluminium and polyester resin is the main material to go for. We've got an ongoing debate with some people who prefer iron. I don't say that iron is not working, but I think it's not as strong, and I think it's because the filings, the way the machining processes work, the filings are a lot bigger and clunkier, and there's a lot less of that thin layering. So,
Yeah.
I
in a
agree
kind
with
of
you about the iron.
in a
It's not as
in a, in a,
conductive either.
Yes.
to
And
me
Ken
it feels
Rolla,
like
our
a dust.
last guest, talks about the Casimir effect and how the smaller and finer the metals are, the more area there is to get that effect that you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Although I feel that it should be leaf-like. It shouldn't be like dust. A lot of people have then started promoting aluminium dust as the ultimate strong orgonite, and I don't feel that, and I don't see that really as a viable improvement.
Right.
So I
Well,
feel
we
that
know
it
yours
has to be a bit
works.
like leafy, or what we used to call a meta that we had as Christmas tree decorations, kind of like,
Tinsel.
that's it, tinsel, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, we go for that quality of aluminum where it
mm,
is like tinsel, and that kind of bulks up the cavity of the mold, and that allows
yeah,
us to
yeah,
pack as much metal in there as we
Yeah.
can and not have as much resin.
Yeah.
right,
Do you put a
yeah.
quartz point in yours or a quartz nugget?
In the tower busters, we just put breakage
Yeah, that's what we do too.
crumbs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
we do.
crumbs. I'm not wasting a pointed crystal on that. We are using
Right.
pointed crystals in the HHGs, actually 5 of them, which is the
Right.
original Don Croft design. And Don has later started using kind of a thick wire spiral with one crystal only in the top. Probably because to get crystals in America is a lot more expensive than here.
Ah,
We used to have quite good sources for crystals. They're drying up a little bit now, and it's also becoming more expensive, but we stick to that original idea of having 4 pointed crystals in the bottom of an HHG and one pointing to the top.
yeah, we've been making that
Uh,
design as well with a pyramid shape, and we find it extremely
mm,
effective energetically. Ken Rolla
yeah,
describes that he calls orgone energy scalar energy, but it's the same thing, and how the
yeah,
pyramid shape actually that directs the energy. You have an increased scalar energy field through the point of pyramids, which is like what
mm,
explains the pyramids in Egypt and many of these other monuments
mm,
that are actually
mm,
energetic devices on Earth.
sure. hmm We've
Yeah.
actually gifted those pyramids in Egypt.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
that's beautiful. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. No, we've done some about 30 or 40 tower busters and a few earth pipes on that whole plateau.
I wonder
Wow.
if it'll start raining since they never get rain in Egypt. Maybe things will change.
They'll be devastated because the way they build and the way they live, their whole infrastructure will collapse.
Oh, so no rain. We
And
don't want rain
if,
then.
if,
Okay.
now they'll have to build properly. But I mean, if you see the electrical installations and all that, it'll just short out.
Oh.
It'll be
Okay, then
it
then
will be.
let's just hope that they don't get rain in Egypt then and that they just have the good energy from the orgonite that you gifted.
Yeah,
Uh,
they must. I don't know. Maybe not in the cities.
right,
I
right.
think Cairo cannot survive a real rain.
I see. Well, they're just not they're not used to it, I suppose. Well,
Mm.
I know we spoke a little earlier in the show about when you were hauled off to jail for gifting orgonite. Are you finding just in general opposition and resistance to the work you do, or are you keeping it so
Not op
under wraps
not
that
op
people don't even know?
we are not confronting any people, so I haven't seen any openly hostile
Right.
um, acts or even insinuations from anybody in the South African government, for example.
Okay.
And even when we were in Mozambique, I know that the then health minister, Manto Chabalala Msimang, who was also well known for her controversial stance on AIDS, actually knew about our case and was probably making a few hints here and there to her colleagues in Mozambique.
I see.
So I think there are some people in government that actually like what we are doing secretly.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Do
I
you
think so.
find, I
You know,
want
the
to,
thing. Hmm?
do you find that you have, this happens to us, so that's why I'm asking. Do you find that you have energetic attacks against you due to the work you're doing? Do you
Definitely,
find that they're,
definitely.
okay, can you speak a little about
Yeah.
that? Because we find it's more on the energetic level too than on the physical plane.
You see, I'm not claiming to be a psychic in any way. So it's more like a hunch, that you have culminating adversity, mounting adversity, and then you feel miserable and you get kind of negative thoughts and it's basically telltale signs that you are under some sort of radionic or black magic attack.
Right. Yeah, I
I
feel
can
that
I can
too.
identify that, and what we used to do in such cases is take 30 tower busters and hammer them somewhere,
Really?
Yes, and the other thing is unfortunately it has sort of died down. We used to have this group um, with Don Croft and a few others where we would meet on a kind of online chat platform and do kind of psychic predator.
I see. Yeah, I've seen something remarkable where Carol Croft was on an interview with Dooney, her friend, and they were actually having their
Yeah,
signal cut off, and they were able to bring the signal back. I had to do that the whole time we interviewed Laura Eisenhower on this show. I had to do that because the powers that be do not want Laura Eisenhower talking, and the signal cut out constantly. So I literally had to do intense energy work just to keep the signal going through the show. And I feel like, if I hadn't done that for the second hour, we would have lost it even more. So I barely talked the second hour. I just focused. See, we lost
And
George.
there's George.
Okay, so okay, I love it. This is great. All right, another psychic attack on the human frequency. We're talking about something related to the entities doing etheric attacks against us, and immediately we lose the signal with George.
That's right.
I feel like this is a great example. I know it's a real inconvenience.
It's nice of them to provide these examples so succinctly, though.
Right. It's a real inconvenience, I should say, but at the same time, I think it's a great example. So we're just going to wait until we get George back. This happens. Okay, with Laura Eisenhower, when we were talking about the false power structure and archonic power structure.
Oh, they didn't like that one.
When the subject came up, it would cut out immediately. The second that George Ritschl started talking about how to make proper orgonite,
it
cut out immediately. And now I have asked George about etheric attacks, and we've lost the signal.
It's the most crucial points that they cut the signal out.
Right.
It happens time and time
We're
again.
going to bring George back into the call. I'm going to do that right now. So just give me a moment to do that.
Yeah, this is very, very interesting when we get very overt examples of, and it's always those keywords, when you mention proper orgonite or you bring up the false power, and any type of just real damning exposure of the parasitic order that.
Well, I have another thing to add to this conversation.
Yes,
we're trying
do.
to add George back into the call right now. Another thing I need to add is if you've noticed, when we have people on hardwired connections, this can't really happen. And we have George is on wireless because it's the only thing that he can get out there. And
Laura Eisenhower was also on a wireless
wireless
connection. So it's far easier for them to to disrupt and disturb these types of conference calls when there is a wireless connection involved. When it's hardwired, it's far more difficult for them
Right.
to interrupt it.
Well, here's another interesting thing now. When we had Ken Rolla on for a second time recently, he was traveling and he was on wireless and he didn't drop once. And that's curious to me. Ken is a remarkable individual who has had ET contact with dark extraterrestrials, reptilians, and he has put a lot of work into deflecting these energies. And so have we, and so has George. But I think there's something about Ken's abilities that enabled that call to not drop, which was amazing. So where we got cut off was exactly where we always get cut off, which is where we're talking
Hello?
about. Oh, George, you're back. Okay, good.
Welcome back,
We got
George.
cut off just when we were going to talk about etheric attacks,
Uh,
or just talking about that.
and
Of course,
actually, we were just talking about lines being cut, and then the line was cut.
right.
So
And
it
Yeah.
was like,
Well, while you were out, we were discussing that this just happens all the time. Whenever there's something particularly exposing of the parasitic structure, they get pissed off and
and
they
they're
cut the
able to do
line.
it more easily with Wi-Fi. But George, I'm so glad that we got you back on the line. So the next question I was
mhm,
going to ask you about was the way that your view of the world and the nature of reality changes using orgonite and orgone energy, because this
mhm.
has happened for us. Things are not what they used to be. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure, sure. That's deep now, hey? Um,
Yeah, and
it's
hopefully they won't
you
cut us
know
off
it's
again.
mm, yeah, they won't again because they are now totally exposed. But it's very hard to say. Definitely my view of life has changed a lot, but I have no idea how it would have changed in the last 14 years if I had not done what I've done. That's the hard part. And yeah, I mean, I've obviously become a lot more aware of how can I say that the power of intuition and intent,
Yes. Yes.
and how things are actually happening. Also, I've become more aware of a um, yeah. I'm not gonna try and sound religious now, but that there is some kind of a divine sphere or a divine guidance actually happening. Um, that sounds now all very mystical, but if you ask me what my change of thought is, then that would be it. It's definitely a greater awareness of a spiritual level of things that happen.
Right.
And
I found the orgone energy tears away a lot of that the noise that blocks those feelings anyway. So
mm, mm.
do you feel that the orgone itself helped with that awakening into other levels of thinking?
It would, I mean, as I say, it's so hard to say when you do a lot of things that all work in the same direction, and sort of start meditating on a regular basis and do Tai Chi and all kinds of things. So you don't really know what of the good things comes from what. And that's also part of the problem that alternative medicine generally has. That you're not popping one pill and then you see the disease disappear, but you're actually starting to live a different life and approach life different and take responsibility for what you're doing, and then you also feel better and start being more healthy. But to actually say that it was actually this herb or that food that you've been eating that has actually made you healthy is actually difficult.
Yeah, it's hard
And
to
in the
say
same,
what it is, right? It's hard to
yeah, in the
prove
same
anything.
way, I can say that orgonite is for me part of a journey that has helped me seeing things differently.
Yeah, for sure.
But is it like, because I'm saying this in such a cautious way because I believe that there are so many people who are still caught in that mechanistic pop a pill and experience this or that result. Like questions we are getting from potential customers is, if I put this orgonite, will I sleep better? I don't know. I really don't know.
Right.
Um,
Because it's
some
different for
people
different
actually,
people.
yes, and some people feel miserable when they introduce orgonite in their
That is amazing you said
uh,
that. I had somebody, a
in their
customer of ours, say that they threw the Orgonite pendant out the window because they didn't like
yeah,
the way it felt. And I said, you should have told me, I would have refunded your money. But I think it just probably needed to be
yeah.
gifted to that spot. That's probably why it happened.
Mm. Yeah, and in the beginning, I was going to all these alternative health fairs where you have the Reiki people and the palm readers and various psychics of different degrees of spiritual cleanliness. And there were always some who felt terribly uncomfortable with the orgonite in the room,
Hmm.
especially of the mind readers, and I'm now convinced that these people were thoroughly negative and actually in that their professional spiritual thing was grounded in the satanic sphere,
No kidding.
and
That
and
is so,
and and
that's
they
crazy.
and that and they feel uncomfortable. They get shifty.
Right. George, something strange
And
happened on the bus the other day. Maybe you could explain
mhm,
this to me. Gabriel and I sat down. We're in LA. We sat on the bus, and behind this woman, the minute we sat behind her, she got up and moved, and I immediately smelled my armpit to see if I smelled bad, which I did not. So
okay,
I know it wasn't because of an odor. So Gabe said that he thought that maybe that she was a dark entity or possessed.
it's possible. Yeah, I mean, Bradley has been talking about spontaneous shapeshifting in the post office.
Ha!
Huh.
No
You
kidding.
know,
Maybe they're responsible for
yeah.
the lost Orgonite recently. We had a lost delivery
Yeah, I
recently.
mean, he
Yeah.
he he had he had this thing called a raptor repellent. Do you know?
Oh, tell me about that, please.
It was a
And
little
I'm gonna
golden.
pray this conversation doesn't drop.
No, no, I think we still have it somewhere. Because sometimes you get people where you get a look from them or something which is so deeply hateful, and you think this is truly reptilian. You get that once in a while, but I've never seen somebody spontaneously actually change their physical shape or growing a tail in their trousers. And that's what I'm
Thank
not talking in
goodness.
the I'm not talking in the front. I'm talking in the rear. Okay.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
no, we got it, we got it. George, our guest Ken Rolla has actually met the reptilians face to face. We were talking about him a little because he works with orgone energy as well, and he's met them.
Okay. Yeah,
That was
yeah,
no
yeah.
pleasant experience.
Okay, great. Yeah. No, I mean they're probably also just species. I don't know. I've seen things that I would say they were cloaked UFOs and stuff like that, but I had no direct physical encounters with anything
Right. Yeah. I know. I'm
clearly
waiting for
clearly
the
not
day when
not
that happens.
not of this dimension. And I did have dinner with Jonathan Oppenheimer, but he didn't shapeshift, and that was before Orgonite.
I see. Well, and the nature of these entities is kind of a mystery to us at this point. We do
Hmm.
know they exist, and I'm glad you acknowledge it. I'd love to talk with you more about that on a future occasion because
I'm
this
not
is
I'm
it.
not an expert. I'm not an expert on that at all.
Well, neither am I. It's a fascinating topic. I am aware of dark entities infiltrating this world, and also Wilhelm Reich found that to be the case. So that's something where we're now able to make a connection between this energetic warfare and
Did
extra
Wilhelm Reich talk
dimensional.
about these kind of things? Did Wilhelm? I mean,
Yeah.
Wilhelm Reich talked about the spacemen, right? That's
Yes, he
actually the
did.
Yes.
In
book.
Contact with Space.
In his last
That's
book.
my
That you,
favorite of his
but
books.
you see, that's the one where when I was reading all this stuff at age 14, 15, I thought now he's really going cookie.
And
And
then I think he even felt like he was going kooky because he was seeing these unexplainable things and
yeah,
learning
because he
things that,
wasn't. I mean, Wilhelm Reich was not a new ager. He was a guy. who was wearing a white lab coat, and he liked
Yeah.
to see himself as a scientist, and he
He
liked
was a
to,
scientist.
yeah,
Yes, he promoted functionalism. He rejected
yes,
mysticism and
And
yes, yes,
mechanistic thinking.
mechanism, and
Yeah.
his
yeah,
middle ground was functionalism.
yeah,
And
yeah.
anyway, we want to thank you for joining us on what we hope is our middle ground, the human frequency.
Yeah. Yeah, we're about out of
Lovely.
time,
I like
George.
that. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah.
We
It was
want you to
was wonderful to talk to you. Wonderful to talk
Oh,
to you, and
it was a thrill. We admire you so much, and just please take a moment to talk about your website again, so that people will come visit you and buy your organites.
now is my chance.
Now it's your
The
chance.
ultimate marketing pitch.
Yeah,
Okay,
go for
please
it.
visit www.organizeafrica, and it's organize with an S like the British English. And that's not because I love the British Empire, it's just the English that we have here in South Africa. So if you like this talk, please visit our website, organizeafrica.com, and check out all the information there and maybe buy some products or check out how to make it yourself.
That's ORGONISE,
Yes,
organizeafrica.com,
yes,
and
that's
our
right.
website, thekembo.com, where you can find links to our Etsy shop and our blog,
And a link to Organize Africa.
and a link to Organize Africa
Yeah.
and George's BEM conference. Anyhow, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Human Frequency. Thank you, George, and we cannot wait to see all of you guys at Contact in the Desert, June 3rd through 5th.